I'm Jarvis, 27 years old, and I never thought I'd see the day when my own family would try to take away something I worked so hard for. Growing up as the least favorite child prepared me for disappointment, but nothing prepared me for my housewarming party. My sister Amanda looked around my new home and announced, "Your house is perfect for my kids." Before I could respond, my mother chimed in, "Pack your bags, Jarvis." The room went silent. I felt a strange mix of anger and satisfaction as I reached for my phone. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables on the family that never believed in me. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, where the houses were close enough that you could hear your neighbors arguing if their windows were open. Our house was nothing special, just a 3-bedroom colonial with fading blue paint and creaky floorboards that announced your presence no matter how quietly you tried to walk at night. From my earliest memories, I knew I wasn't the favorite child. My mother, Patricia, made it painfully obvious that my sister Amanda, 5 years my senior, was the sun around which our family orbited. Every accomplishment of hers was celebrated with enthusiasm, while mine were acknowledged with the bare minimum of attention, if at all. Amanda made the honor roll again. Mom would announce at dinner, her voice swelling with pride. We should take her out to celebrate this weekend. When I made the honor roll a few years later, the response was a distracted, "That's nice, Jarvis," as Mom continued folding laundry without looking up. The disparity in treatment became even more pronounced after my father Robert passed away when I was 10. Dad had been my buffer, the one who would take me fishing on Saturday mornings or help with my science projects. He wasn't perfect, but he tried to balance the scales when Mom's favoritism became too obvious. The life insurance money that came after Dad's death should have provided for both of us children equally. Instead, it funded Amanda's dance lessons, her first car, her college tuition, while I wore clothes from the discount store, and was told there wasn't enough money for the computer camp I desperately wanted to attend. "Girls need more support in this world," Mom would say, when I dared to question the disparity. "Or Amanda is more sensitive than you. You're strong. You can handle disappointment better." By 13, I'd learned to stop asking why Amanda got a brand new iPhone while I inherited her old flip phone. I stopped questioning why she got a Toyota Corolla for her 16th birthday while I was told I'd need to work part-time jobs to save for my own car. I stopped expecting Mom to show up to my events when they conflicted with anything Amanda had going on. The science fair incident still burns in my memory. I had worked for months on a project about renewable energy, staying up late. After finishing my regular homework testing different designs for a small-scale wind turbine. When I won first place, the only person there to see it was my science teacher. Mom had chosen to attend Amanda's dance recital instead, the same recital that happened every 3 months like clockwork. "I'm sorry, Jarvis," she said later, not looking particularly sorry at all. "Amanda needed me there for moral support. You understand, right? You're always so independent." The one bright spot in my childhood was my grandfather Thomas, my dad's father. Unlike my mother, Grandpa Thomas saw my potential. He recognized my intelligence, my drive, my determination. While Mom was busy shuttling Amanda to dance competitions and shopping trips, Grandpa would pick me up on weekends and take me fishing just like Dad used to. But our trips weren't just about fishing. As we sat by the lake waiting for a bite, Grandpa Thomas would talk to me about business, about investing, about planning for the future. "The stock market isn't gambling, if you know what you're doing," he'd say, showing me the financial section of his newspaper. "It's about patience and research. Most people want to get rich quick, but real wealth builds slowly, brick by brick." By 16, I was helping Grandpa research stocks on my school computer. By 17, he had helped me open a small investment account with the money I earned working at the local grocery store. He became more than just my grandfather. He was my mentor, the one adult who believed that I could be something more than just Amanda's little brother. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Jarvis," he would tell me. "Better than your old grandpa. One day, you're going to make something special of yourself. I can feel it in these old bones." I held on to those words during the darkest moments when Mom forgot to attend parent-teacher conferences or when Amanda borrowed my savings to buy concert tickets without asking. Grandpa Thomas believed in me, and sometimes that was enough to keep me going. The day I turned 18 should have been a celebration of adulthood, of new beginnings. High school graduation was just weeks away, and despite the challenges at home, I had excelled academically. My grades and test scores had opened doors that I once thought would remain firmly shut. The thick envelope from MIT had arrived a week before my birthday, and I'd kept it hidden under my mattress, reading and rereading the acceptance letter when no one was around. Not only had I been accepted to one of the top engineering programs in the country, but I had also been awarded a full scholarship based on academic merit and financial need. The path forward was clearing before me, a road paved with opportunities my father never had opportunities, that even Grandpa Thomas had only dreamed about. Despite years of disappointment, some foolish part of me still hoped that this achievement would finally earn my mother's approval, would finally make her see me. So I planned a small announcement at dinner on my birthday, even spending my own money to buy a cake from the fancy bakery Amanda liked. "I have some news," I said after we'd eaten the takeout Chinese food that Mom had ordered. My palms were sweating as I pulled out the acceptance letter. I got into MIT. Full scholarship. For a brief moment, there was silence. Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and I saw something flicker across her face, surprise, perhaps even a hint of pride. But before she could respond, Amanda cleared her throat. "Well, since we're sharing news," she said, her voice rising with excitement, "Craig and I have some news too." She reached for her boyfriend's hand. "We're pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother, Mom." The transformation on my mother's face was immediate. The tentative look of pride that had begun to form was washed away by a tidal wave of joy. She leapt up from her chair, knocking over her water glass in her haste to embrace Amanda. A baby. Oh my goodness, a baby. She was crying, kissing Amanda's cheeks, pulling Craig into the hug. "I'm going to be a grandmother. This is the happiest day of my life." I sat there, my MIT acceptance letter still in my hand, now damp from my sweating palms, as the celebration swirled around me. No one congratulated me. No one acknowledged my news again. The cake I had bought remained in its box on the counter, forgotten in the excitement over Amanda's announcement. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Mom knocked softly on my door. "That MIT thing sounds nice," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "But you'll be careful in the big city, right? And maybe you can find a part-time job there to help with expenses. The baby will mean a lot of new costs for the family." That was it. That was all the acknowledgement my achievement received. The following week brought more changes. Craig, faced with the reality of impending fatherhood, panicked and broke up with Amanda. She came home sobbing mascara, streaking down her face, and Mom spent the night consoling her, making hot chocolate, and promising that everything would be okay, that they would figure it out together. 3 days later, Mom called me into the living room for a family meeting. Amanda sat on the couch, eyes red, but no longer crying. Mom stood beside her, one hand protectively on her shoulder. "Jarvis, we need to discuss the living arrangements." Mom began, her voice gentle but firm. "With the baby coming, Amanda will need to move back home. She'll need support and her old room back." I blinked, confused. Her old room. "But that's my room now. Where would I go?" "Well, you're 18 now," Mom said, as if this explained everything. "And you're going to college anyway. MIT is in Cambridge, right? You'll be living in a dorm." "But that's not until the end of August," I protested. "And what about holidays, summers? Where will I stay then?" Mom sighed, the sound tinged with impatience. "Jarvis, you've always been so independent. I'm sure you can figure something out. Maybe stay with friends, or get a summer sublet near campus. Amanda needs stability right now. She's in a very fragile state. So am I. Just not part of this family anymore." The words felt strange in my mouth, too dramatic, like something from a television show. But the reality was sinking in. I was being pushed out of my home, my very existence, an inconvenience to my mother's plans for Amanda. "Don't be so dramatic," Mom said, confirming my thoughts. "Of course you're family, but you're an adult now, and Amanda needs help. I need you to be the bigger person here." The bigger person. Always I was expected to be the bigger person, to understand, to accept less, to need less. "How long do I have?" I asked, my voice hollow. "We were thinking you could be out by the weekend," Mom replied. "That gives you 3 days to pack." 3 days. 18 years in this house, and I was given 3 days to leave. I looked at Amanda, hoping to see some recognition of the injustice, some flicker of shame. But she just sat there, one hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach, her eyes avoiding mine. That night, alone in my room, the room that would soon be Amanda's again, I called the one person who had never let me down. "Grandpa, it's Jarvis. I need help." Grandpa Thomas lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Somerville, about 20 minutes from our family home in Boston. The building was old, but well-maintained, populated mostly by retirees and a few graduate students who appreciated the quiet atmosphere and reasonable rent. "It's not much," he said, as he helped me carry my few boxes and bags inside, "but what's mine is yours for as long as you need it." I was prepared to sleep on his couch, but Grandpa had already set up a futon in the small dining nook off the kitchen. He'd cleared out a drawer in his dresser and half of his closet for my clothes. Small gestures that spoke volumes about the difference between being wanted and being tolerated. That first night after we'd ordered pizza and unpacked my things, Grandpa sat me down for a serious conversation. His normally jovial face was solemn, his eyes carrying a weight I hadn't noticed before. "There's something I need to tell you, Jarvis," he said, his voice steady, despite the gravity in his expression. "I've been putting it off, but now that you're here, you need to know. I have pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors give me less than a year." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. Grandpa Thomas, my anchor, my mentor, the one person who had always believed in me, was dying. The unfairness of it crushed down on me with suffocating weight. "Does Mom know?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "I told her a month ago," he replied. "She said she'd come visit, bring Amanda to see me." His smile was sad, still waiting on that visit. That night, lying on the futon in the dark, listening to Grandpa's soft snoring from the bedroom, I made a decision. I would make the most of whatever time he had left. I would learn everything he could teach me, and I would never ever rely on my mother or sister again. The next morning I proposed a deal to Grandpa. "Teach me everything you know about business and investing," I said over breakfast. "All of it, and I'll take care of you. I'll be here for whatever you need." Grandpa studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Deal. But MIT comes first. Your education is non-negotiable." The months that followed established a new rhythm to my life. Mornings were spent helping Grandpa with his increasingly difficult daily tasks, making breakfast, helping him bathe, driving him to doctor appointments. Afternoons were dedicated to my freshman classes at MIT, where I decided to major in computer science with a minor in business. Evenings were our learning time. Grandpa had worked in finance for 40 years before retiring, and his knowledge was both broad and deep. We covered everything from basic accounting principles to complex investment strategies. He taught me how to read financial statements, how to spot promising companies, how to calculate risk versus reward. He shared stories of his biggest successes and his most painful failures, extracting lessons from each. "The most important asset in business isn't money," he told me repeatedly. "It's relationships. Treat people with respect, be honest, even when it's hard, and remember that your reputation takes years to build and seconds to destroy." As his health declined, our roles gradually reversed. I became the teacher presenting what I'd learned in my business classes for his critique. He became the student listening with pride as I explained concepts he'd introduced me to, now deepened by my formal education. By spring, Grandpa was mostly bedridden. I had set up a small desk beside his bed where I could study while keeping him company. We watched old westerns together, his favorites, and I read him articles from the financial newspapers when his vision became too blurry for him to read them himself. "I've made some adjustments to my will," he told me one evening, his voice weaker, but his mind still sharp. "My medical bills have eaten into my savings, but there's still about $75,000 in investments. It's all going to you." "Grandpa, I don't want to talk about this," I protested. "Tough," he replied, with a ghost of his old stubbornness. "We're talking about it. That money isn't just a gift, Jarvis. It's seed capital. I want you to use it to start something of your own someday. Something that matters to you." Grandpa Thomas passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks before the end of my freshman year. I was holding his hand, having fallen asleep in the chair beside his bed while studying for finals. The hospice nurse said it was common for people to wait until their loved ones were present, but not watching, as if to spare them the moment of departure. The funeral was small, just a few of Grandpa's old colleagues, some neighbors from his building, and me. My mother called the night before to say she and Amanda couldn't make it. Amanda wasn't feeling well with the pregnancy, and Mom needed to stay with her. I wasn't surprised, but the final abandonment still stung. After the service, I threw myself into my studies with renewed determination. Grandpa had believed in me when no one else did. I would make something of myself, something that would have made him proud. During my sophomore year, I started a small tech company out of my dorm room. The idea came from a cybersecurity class project, a more intuitive way to protect personal data online. I used $5,000 of Grandpa's inheritance to buy equipment and pay for server space, working through nights and weekends to build a prototype. The first year was brutal. I failed more times than I succeeded. My initial design had critical flaws. Potential investors laughed me out of meetings. I almost gave up at least a dozen times, the voice of doubt in my head sounding suspiciously like my mother's dismissive tone. But each time I considered quitting, I remembered Grandpa's words, "Success isn't about never failing. It's about getting up one more time than you fall." So I kept getting up, kept refining my idea, kept pitching to anyone who would listen. The breakthrough came during my junior year, when a professor introduced me to a former student who worked in venture capital. Julian Lee saw something in my idea that others had missed: its potential to scale beyond individual users to small businesses concerned about data breaches. "This needs work," Julian said, after reviewing my business plan. "But the core concept is solid. Would you be open to some guidance?" That guidance turned into a $20,000 angel investment, the first outside money into what I now called Shield Tech. Julian's investment brought legitimacy, which attracted other investors. By graduation, Shield Tech had secured $1 million in funding and hired its first 3 employees beyond me. The next 4 years were a blur of 18-hour workdays, product launches, client acquisitions, and rapid growth. We expanded from data protection for small businesses to comprehensive security solutions for mid-sized companies. Our staff grew from 4 to 20, then to 50. We moved from my apartment to a small office, then to an entire floor in a downtown building. When a larger tech company approached us with an acquisition offer in my 24th year, I was ready to take the next step. The sale of Shield Tech for $2.8 million wasn't headline news in the tech world, but it changed my life forever. After paying my investors and setting aside money for taxes, I was left with just over $1 million, a fortune beyond anything I could have imagined when I was sleeping on Grandpa's futon 6 years earlier. I had risen from nothing, just as Grandpa Thomas had believed I would. And I had done it entirely, without the help of the family that had thrown me away. After Grandpa's funeral, I made a conscious decision to cut contact with my mother and sister. The pain of their absence at the service, the final confirmation that I didn't matter in their world, was too fresh, too raw. I changed my phone number, created new email accounts, and focused entirely on building my company and finishing my degree. That didn't stop them from trying to reach me occasionally. They found my work email through the Shield Tech website. They sent messages to my university account. They even tried contacting me through mutual acquaintances from high school. But there was a pattern to their attempts. They only reached out when they needed something. Amanda's car broke down, and with the baby she really needs reliable transportation. Could you help out? The house needs a new roof, and I just don't have the savings for it. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. Junior has been accepted to a private preschool, but the tuition is more than we expected, since you're doing so well now. Each message went unanswered. Each request reinforced my decision to keep my distance. They had never been there for me. I saw no reason to be there for them, especially when they only saw me as a potential source of funds rather than a family member worthy of genuine relationship. During those years of separation, I focused on healing. The success of Shield Tech provided financial security, but money couldn't address the deeper wounds of childhood neglect and rejection. On the recommendation of a colleague, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Michael Reeves, who specialized in family trauma. "What you experienced was emotional neglect," Dr. Reeves explained during one session. "It's particularly insidious because there's no obvious abuse to point to, just an absence of what should have been there. The support, the celebration of your achievements, the sense of belonging. I've done fine without it." I insisted, uncomfortable with the vulnerability the conversation evoked. You've succeeded professionally. Yes, he agreed. But success and healing are different things. One doesn't automatically bring the other. Those therapy sessions were often the hardest part of my week, more challenging than any business negotiation or technical problem. They forced me to look at the wounded child I still carried within me, the boy who had learned to expect nothing and be grateful for crumbs of attention. Slowly, session by session, I began to understand that my worth wasn't tied to my mother's inability to see it, that I deserved to be valued simply for being who I was. 2 years after selling Shield Tech, I met Rachel Klein at a tech conference in San Francisco. She was a UX designer presenting on ethical design practices, and her passionate advocacy for putting user needs above profit margins caught my attention immediately. When I approached her after her talk to continue the discussion, I was struck by both her intelligence and her warmth. Our first date stretched from coffee to dinner to a long walk along the Embarcadero as we discovered shared interests in hiking, science fiction, and social justice. But what struck me most about Rachel wasn't our compatibility, it was her relationship with her family. The first time she invited me to Sunday dinner with her parents and siblings, I was nervous to the point of nausea. My only model for family gatherings was tension-filled meals, where everyone walked on eggshells around my mother's moods and Amanda's demands. But the Klein family dinner was nothing like that. There was friendly argument and passionate debate, but it was undergirded by obvious affection. Rachel's father teased her about her childhood's stubbornness, while clearly admiring the determination it had become. Her mother disagreed openly with her brother's political views, but still hugged him warmly when he left. They asked me genuine questions about my work, my interests, my opinions, and actually listened to the answers. "Is your family always like this?" I asked Rachel, as we drove back to the city afterward. "Like what?" "So interested in each other. So respectful even when you disagree." Rachel glanced at me curiously. "That's pretty normal for us. Why, what's your family like?" I hesitated, then gave her the abbreviated version of my family history. I expected pity, but Rachel's response was refreshingly straightforward. "They sound terrible," she said simply. "Have you considered reaching out to them again, though? Not for their sake, but for yours. Sometimes reconciliation isn't about forgiving the unforgivable, it's about not letting the past dictate your future." Her question stayed with me for months. As our relationship deepened, as I spent more time with her family, and saw what healthy relationships could look like, I began to wonder if maintaining absolute separation from my mother and sister was still serving me, or if it had become another form of being controlled by the past. "I'm not saying you should let them back into your life on their terms," Dr. Reeves said when I brought it up in therapy. "But perhaps there's a middle ground between total estrangement and picking up where you left off, as if nothing happened." I was considering this possibility, turning it over in my mind, without reaching any conclusions, when fate intervened in an unexpected way. While browsing real estate listings, a hobby I'd developed since selling Shield Tech, I came across a property that made my heart stop. It was in my old neighborhood in Boston, just 6 blocks from where I grew up. But this wasn't just any house. It was the Winston Mansion, the crown jewel of the area, a stately Victorian that had belonged to the same family for generations. As children, we had made up stories about what might be inside those walls, behind those leaded glass windows, and ornate trim. The listing price was $960,000, a fortune by the standards of my childhood, but well within my means now. Something about the property called to me, perhaps the symbolism of returning to the place that had never felt like home and claiming space on my own terms. Or perhaps it was simply the perfect investment opportunity, a solid piece of real estate in a desirable neighborhood. Whatever the reason, I found myself placing an offer the next day. When it was accepted, I felt a strange mix of triumph and trepidation. I was buying a house 6 blocks from my mother and sister. After years of separation, I was deliberately placing myself back in their orbit. The renovation process took 8 months. I flew back and forth between San Francisco and Boston, overseeing the transformation of the old house into a blend of restored Victorian grandeur and modern comfort. Rachel, who had initially been skeptical of my cross-country property purchase, became increasingly involved in the design decisions. "If we're going to spend time here, it should reflect both of us," she said during one video call as I showed her tile samples for the master bathroom. Her casual inclusion of herself in the future of the house wasn't lost on me. We had been dating for nearly 2 years by then, and though we hadn't formally discussed marriage, we both knew we were building toward a shared life. As the renovation neared completion, I faced the decision I had been avoiding. Would I let my mother and sister know I was back in Boston? Would I invite them into this new chapter of my life? Rachel, ever practical, offered the perspective I needed. Invite them to the housewarming, she suggested. It's a controlled environment with other people present. You can see how it goes without committing to anything more. After much deliberation, I sent formal invitations to both my mother and Amanda, including Amanda's children, whom I had never met. The RSVP came surprisingly quickly. They would attend. And just like that, the stage was set for a reunion I had never expected to happen. The Winston Mansion had been transformed. What was once a stately but fading Victorian was now a showcase of thoughtful restoration and modern luxury. We had preserved the original hardwood floors, the intricate ceiling medallions, and the carved banisters, while updating the kitchen with professional-grade appliances, converting smaller rooms into spacious gathering areas, and adding subtle smart home technology throughout. The 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom house spread across 4,000 square feet, with a backyard garden that included a stone patio perfect for entertaining. The renovation had pushed the property value well beyond my purchase price, but that had never been my primary concern. I wanted a home that reflected my journey, honoring history, while embracing innovation, preserving what worked, while fearlessly changing what didn't. Rachel had flown in from San Francisco a week before the party to help with the final preparations. Though she had visited several times during the renovation, seeing the completed project moved her to tears. "It's beautiful, Jarvis," she said, running her hand along the restored wainscoting in the foyer. "It feels like it's been waiting for you all along." Rachel's presence calmed my growing anxiety about the upcoming reunion with my family. She had a way of grounding me when my thoughts spiraled, of reminding me that I was no longer the powerless teenager being pushed out of his home. "Remember, this is your house," she said, as we finalized the guest list at the kitchen island. "You set the boundaries here. If things get uncomfortable, we can always ask them to leave." "What if they don't?" I asked, voicing one of my deeper fears. "What if they just take over, like they always did?" Rachel took my hand, her expression serious. "Then we call security. I'm not joking, Jarvis. This is your celebration. You've earned it. Anyone who can't respect that doesn't get to stay, family or not." The guest list included 50 people, colleagues from Shield Tech, who had remained friends after the acquisition, professors from MIT, who had mentored me, neighbors we had met during the renovation, and Rachel's parents and siblings, who were flying in for the occasion. And of course, my mother Patricia and sister Amanda, along with Amanda's 3 children, Junior 7, Sophia 5, and Mason 3. In the days leading up to the party, my anxiety manifested in obsessive attention to details. I personally verified the catering order 3 times. I rearranged furniture to optimize conversation flow. I created and recreated the playlist for background music, trying to strike the perfect balance between sophisticated and welcoming. "You're nesting," Rachel observed with amusement, "like a very neurotic bird preparing for important visitors." I couldn't deny it. Part of me was still the child desperate for approval, setting the stage for a perfect performance that might finally earn my mother's recognition. Another part was the successful adult, wanting to showcase exactly what I had achieved without their support. The conflict between these aspects of myself was exhausting. The morning of the party dawned clear and cool, a perfect early autumn day in Boston. As Rachel and I shared coffee on the back patio, watching golden light filter through the changing leaves of the maple tree, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led me here. 10 years ago, I was sleeping on Grandpa's futon, shell-shocked from being kicked out of my home, I said quietly. If someone had told me then that I'd one day own the Winston Mansion, that I'd be hosting a party with catering and valet parking, that I'd have found someone like you, I wouldn't have believed any of it. Rachel squeezed my hand. "Grandpa Thomas would be proud of you. Not just because of the success, but because of who you've become despite everything you went through." The caterers arrived at 3, transforming the kitchen into a hive of efficient activity. The bartenders set up stations in the dining room and garden. Florists delivered arrangements that complemented the home's color scheme. By 5:30, everything was ready, and guests began to arrive. The first hour passed in a pleasant blur of introductions and house tours. Rachel's family arrived early, and immediately set about making themselves useful. Her father manning the bar, her mother keeping an eye on the catering, her brothers engaging shy guests in conversation. The house filled with the warm buzz of voices and laughter, exactly as I had hoped. At 6:45, the doorbell rang again. Through the leaded glass panels, I could make out 3 small figures and 2 adult ones. My family had arrived. Opening the door felt like stepping into a parallel universe. There was my mother, her hair now more gray than brown lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Beside her stood Amanda, heavier than I remembered, but with the same confident posture that had always suggested she expected the world to accommodate her. And 3 children, the oldest boy, bearing a striking resemblance to Amanda's ex-boyfriend Craig, all looking up at me with curiosity. "Jarvis," my mother said, her voice carrying a strange mix of emotions I couldn't quite identify. "You look well." "Thank you for inviting us," Amanda added her tone, suggesting she was doing me a favor by attending. "The kids have been excited all day. Haven't you children?" The youngest boy, Mason, hid behind his mother's legs, while Sophia stared openly at me. Junior, the oldest, looked past me into the house, his eyes widening at the glimpse of the grand staircase. "Is this all yours?" he asked, not bothering with a greeting. "Yes," I replied, stepping back to let them enter. "Welcome to my home." The initial interactions were awkward but civil. I introduced them to Rachel, who managed to be both warm and watchful friendly without being familiar. My mother complimented the house in vague terms. "It's very impressive and you must have worked hard," while her eyes took in every detail as if cataloging its value. Amanda made a show of keeping her children close at first, instructing them to behave in Uncle Jarvis's fancy house. But as she accepted a glass of wine, then another, her attention wandered. The children, sensing freedom, began to explore with increasing boldness. I watched with growing unease as Junior ran his hands along surfaces that had just been cleaned, as Sophia tried to climb the bookshelves in the library, as Mason attempted to touch every appetizer on the catering trays with his fingers. Several guests shot concerned glances in their direction, but neither my mother nor Amanda seemed to notice or care. Rachel caught my eye from across the room, raising an eyebrow in silent question. "Should we intervene?" I gave a small shake of my head. I didn't want the first interaction with my newfound nieces and nephew to be disciplinary. Surely their mother would step in soon. But Amanda seemed more interested in telling my former professor about her challenging life as a single mother than in monitoring her children's behavior. And my mother was busy explaining to Rachel's parents how difficult it had been to raise 2 children on her own after my father died, a narrative that conveniently omitted her treatment of me. "Your sister seems interesting," Rachel murmured when she managed to extract herself from the conversation. "She's asked me 3 times what I think the house is worth, and whether we plan to have children soon." Before I could respond, a crash from the living room interrupted us. Sophia had knocked over a crystal vase, fortunately empty of flowers and water, while attempting to reach a decorative bowl on a high shelf. The vase lay shattered on the hardwood floor, Sophia frozen beside it with wide eyes. I hurried over, concerned first for her safety among the sharp fragments. "Are you okay? Did you cut yourself?" She shook her head, looking fearfully toward her mother, who was now approaching with an expression of exasperation rather than concern. "Sophia, what did I tell you about touching things?" Amanda scolded, grabbing her daughter's arm roughly. Then to me, "Kids right. They're just so curious. I'm sure that vase wasn't expensive." The vase had been a housewarming gift from Rachel's grandmother, a family heirloom she had generously passed on to us. Its monetary value was far less important than its sentimental worth. "It's fine," I said, kneeling to carefully gather the larger pieces. "Accidents happen." "See, Uncle Jarvis isn't mad," Amanda told Sophia, releasing her arm. "Now go find your brothers while the grown-ups talk." As Amanda shooed her daughter away, without helping clean up the mess, or ensuring she understood the lesson about respecting other people's property, I felt a familiar disappointment settling in my chest. Some things, it seemed, never changed. The party continued the incident, with the vase forgotten by most guests, as more drinks were poured and dinner was served. but I noticed that the children's behavior grew increasingly wild as the evening progressed, with Junior now running through the house, Mason smearing chocolate dessert on the upholstery of an antique chair, and Sophia attempting to play the grand piano with her feet. Rachel's father had taken it upon himself to gently redirect the children when possible, suggesting games they could play in the garden where there was space to run. Rachel's mother had discreetly cleaned chocolate from the chair before it could stain. Their quiet interventions highlighted the absence of supervision from my own family members, who seemed to view the party as an opportunity to network rather than a chance to reconnect with me. As the evening approached its peak, with most guests enjoying dessert and coffee in various gathering spaces throughout the first floor, Amanda cornered me in a quiet moment. Her expression had taken on a sweetness that immediately put me on guard. It was the same look she had used as a teenager when asking to borrow my allowance. "This house is amazing, Jarvis," she said, her voice carrying an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. "Truly incredible. The kids absolutely love it." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "It's been a labor of love." "It's so spacious," she continued, running her hand along the marble countertop of the kitchen island. "All these bedrooms going unused. All this room for the kids to play and grow." She paused, her eyes meeting mine with calculated vulnerability. "Which is actually something I wanted to talk to you about." And there it was, the real reason for her sudden interest in reconnecting. I felt a cold certainty settling in my stomach as she continued. "The thing is, my landlord is selling our apartment building. We have to be out by the end of next month, and the rental market is impossible right now. Everything in decent neighborhoods is way beyond what I can afford as a single mom." I remained silent, watching her build her case with a sense of detached fascination. It was like watching a familiar play where I already knew the ending. "The kids have already been through so much with their dad not being in the picture," she went on. "Junior's finally settled in a good school. Uprooting them to some sketchy neighborhood would be devastating." Her voice dropped to a confidential tone. "And between us, Mom's house isn't in great shape. The roof still leaks, and there's that mold issue in the basement." Still, I said nothing. Amanda's eyes darted around the kitchen, taking in the professional appliances, the custom cabinetry, the expansive space designed for people who love to cook and entertain. "This house," she said finally, her voice taking on an entitled edge, "I remembered all too well, is perfect for my kids. They deserve space like this to grow up in. And what else would you do with all this space? It's just you and Rachel, right? And she doesn't even live here full time." The audacity was breathtaking. Not a request to stay temporarily while she found new housing. Not an inquiry about whether I might help with a security deposit for a new apartment. No, Amanda had jumped straight to the assumption that I would hand over my home to her family. Before I could formulate a response, my mother appeared at Amanda's side, as if summoned by some telepathic signal that her favorite child needed backup. "There you two are," she said, her smile brittle. "Catching up after all this time. Isn't it nice?" "I was just telling Jarvis about our housing situation," Amanda explained seamlessly, bringing our mother into the conversation, "about how perfect this place would be for the kids." "Oh yes," my mother agreed immediately, her eyes scanning the kitchen with new purpose. "The children would thrive here. So much better than that cramped apartment or my old house." She turned to me, her expression a practiced blend of appeal and expectation. "Family helps family, Jarvis. That's what we do. And you've been, well, distant for so long. This would be a way to make up for that." The suggestion that I needed to make up for protecting myself from their toxicity nearly made me laugh out loud. But before I could respond, Amanda delivered the final blow. "I've already told the kids they could pick their rooms," she admitted, not a trace of shame in her voice. "Junior has his eye on the blue bedroom upstairs, and Sophia loves the one with the window seat." As if on cue, I heard the thundering of small feet on the stairs, followed by Junior's voice calling out, "Mom, Mason is in my new room and won't get out." My mother's expression hardened slightly at the ill-timed revelation. "Children get excited about these things," she said dismissively. "But really, Jarvis, it would be the sensible arrangement. If you don't agree, just pack your bags. Amanda needs this house more than you do." The kitchen had gone quiet. Nearby guests had overheard the exchange, their conversations faltering as the awkwardness spread like spilled wine. Rachel appeared at my side, her presence a silent statement of support. She didn't speak, allowing me to handle the situation, but her hand found mine and squeezed gently. In that moment, a strange calm washed over me. The anxiety that had plagued me about this reunion, the lingering desire for approval, the last remnants of the child who had been taught he mattered less, all of it seemed to recede. I looked at my mother and sister, these two women, who had shaped so much of my early life with their rejection, and felt nothing but a clear-eyed certainty. Before I respond, I said, reaching for my phone, "Let me show you something." The kitchen remained unusually quiet as I unlocked my phone and navigated to my files. Nearby guests had drifted away, sensing the private nature of the conversation. But a few remained within earshot, including Rachel's parents, who had positioned themselves strategically by the refrigerator with expressions of polite interest that barely masked their protective concern. "Here we go," I said, turning the screen toward my mother and sister. "Take a look at this." The document displayed on my phone was a property deed, not for the Winston mansion where we stood, but for another house. A particular house with fading blue paint and a slightly crooked mailbox. The house I had grown up in. The house where my mother and sister still lived. "I don't understand," my mother said, squinting at the screen. "What is this?" "It's the deed to your house," I replied calmly. "Or rather, my house. I bought it 2 years ago, when the bank was foreclosing on it." The color drained from my mother's face as the implications sank in. Beside her, Amanda's expression shifted from confusion to outrage. "That's impossible," Amanda sputtered. "We've been paying rent to Somerset Property Management for the past 2 years. Somerset Property Management is a subsidiary of JT Investments," I explained. JT for Jarvis Thomas, named after Grandpa. I created it to manage the property anonymously. I scrolled to another document, the rental agreement they had signed 2 years earlier, with my company's name clearly visible at the top. "You've been my tenants for 2 years. I bought the house when the bank foreclosed after you missed 6 mortgage payments." I kept my voice even, stating facts rather than accusations. "I could have evicted you then, but I chose not to. Instead, I had my lawyer set up the management company and offered you a rental agreement at 20% below market value." The silence that followed was profound. My mother's hand went to her throat, a gesture of distress I remembered from childhood. Amanda's jaw clenched, her eyes narrowing, with the familiar look that preceded an explosion of temper. "Why would you do this?" my mother finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you deceive us like this?" The question might have angered me once, with its implicit accusation that I was the one who had done something wrong. Now it merely confirmed how little she understood me, even after all these years. "I didn't do it to deceive you," I replied. "I did it because, despite everything, I didn't want to see you homeless. The house was going to be sold at auction. I had the means to prevent that, so I did." "So you've been playing landlord, watching us struggle to pay rent, when you could have just given us the house?" Amanda demanded, her voice rising. "Do you know how hard it's been for me as a single mother? How many times I've had to choose between fixing things in that old house and buying what the kids need?" I met her gaze steadily. "Remember when you kicked me out at 18, I bought this house." I gestured to the grand space around us with the money grandfather left me. The same grandfather whose funeral you couldn't be bothered to attend. The blunt reminder of their absence at Grandpa Thomas's funeral landed like a physical blow. My mother flinched, and for the first time I saw genuine shame in her eyes. "We were busy," she began weakly. "Amanda was pregnant, and I was grieving alone," I finished for her. "Just like I celebrated my MIT acceptance alone, just like I built my company alone. Just like I've marked every milestone in my adult life without the family who should have been there." Amanda's face had flushed with anger, but beneath it I detected something else. A flicker of recognition quickly suppressed. "So, this is all some elaborate revenge scheme. Buy our house, become our landlord, then invite us here to gloat about it, to throw it in our faces that you're successful while we're struggling." "No," I said quietly. "This isn't about revenge. If it were, I would have raised your rent to market rate. I would have enforced every clause in the lease agreement when Junior damaged the bathroom sink last year, or when you were late with the rent 3 months in a row during the winter." My mother's eyes widened slightly. "You knew about that? About the sink?" "I get detailed reports from the property management team," I explained. "I've known about everything, the leaking roof you mentioned earlier." The mold in the basement. The broken dishwasher. I've approved every repair, often faster than would be standard, because I didn't want you living in poor conditions. Then why reveal yourself now? My mother asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Why tell us at all? Because you came into my home, a home I created for myself and for my future, with Rachel, and immediately started planning how to take it from me. The words weren't angry, just matter of fact. Some patterns never change, it seems. Rachel stepped closer, her arm brushing against mine in silent support. Jarvis bought this house for our future family, she said, her voice gentle but firm. We're getting married next spring. This is where we plan to raise our children. The news of our engagement, something we had only shared with Rachel's family so far, hung in the air. In another reality, this might have been a joyful announcement met with congratulations and excitement. Instead, it served as a boundary marker. A clear statement that this house already had a purpose, a future that didn't include Amanda and her children. I see, my mother said after a moment, her voice strained. Well, congratulations. Amanda wasn't as willing to concede. So what happens now? Are you going to evict us from our home too? Throw us out on the street? Because we dared to ask for help. That depends on you, I replied calmly. I'm offering you a choice. You can continue as my tenants with the same below-market rent, and we can try to build a new relationship based on mutual respect. One where you recognize that I'm not your personal bank or solution to every problem. Where you see me as a person worthy of the same consideration you've always given Amanda. I paused, making sure they understood the alternative. Or, you can continue as you are treating me as an afterthought until you need something. In that case, yes, I will sell the house not to evict you specifically, but because I have no interest in maintaining a business relationship with people who don't value me as family. That's blackmail. Amanda hissed, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. You're threatening us. No. Rachel interjected, her patience visibly wearing thin. He's setting boundaries. There's a difference. Stay out of this? Amanda snapped at her. This is family business. Rachel is family, I corrected firmly. The family I've chosen. The family who has supported me, celebrated with me, been there for me, without conditions or comparisons. My mother placed a restraining hand on Amanda's arm, perhaps sensing that her daughter's rising temper was only making things worse. Jarvis, she said, attempting a conciliatory tone, surely we can discuss this privately as a family. There's no need to air our difficulties in front of your guests. You didn't seem concerned about privacy when you told me to pack my bags in front of everyone, I pointed out. But you're right about one thing, this party is a celebration. Not the place for resolving decades of family dysfunction. We can talk more another time, if you're genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship. Amanda jerked her arm free from our mother's grasp. This is ridiculous. You think because you have money, now you can dictate terms to us? You think you're better than us because you live in some fancy house and have some tech job? No, I said simply. I think I deserve basic respect regardless of what I have or don't have. That's the minimum I'm asking for. Come on, kids. Amanda suddenly shouted, startling everyone nearby. We're leaving. Uncle Jarvis doesn't want us in his perfect house after all. Junior appeared almost instantly, as if he'd been hovering nearby listening. Sophia trailed behind him, her expression confused. Mason had to be retrieved from upstairs, where he'd apparently been jumping on one of the guest beds. Amanda, don't be hasty. My mother urged, her eyes darting between her daughter and me. Jarvis is offering to talk more later. We should what? Mom beg apologize for not worshipping him and his success. Amanda's voice had risen to a near shout, drawing attention from throughout the first floor. I have my pride. Come on, we're going home. Our home, not his. I don't care whose name is on the deed. She stormed toward the front door, children in tow, pausing, only to grab her purse from the coat closet. Mason was crying, confused by the sudden departure and his mother's obvious anger. Sophia looked back at me with wide, uncertain eyes, while Junior maintained a defiant expression that mirrored his mother's and age gal of common to. My mother hesitated, torn between following her daughter and attempting to salvage something from the disastrous evening. Jarvis. She began, her voice low and urgent. Amanda is just upset. She doesn't mean what she's saying. We can fix this. Can we? I asked quietly. Do you even want to? Or do you just want to make sure I don't sell the house? The question hit its mark. She flinched slightly, then drew herself up with dignity. That's not fair. Maybe not, I acknowledged. But it's an honest question. Think about it, Mom. Really think about what kind of relationship you want with me going forward. Not just what you might need from me, but what you're willing to give. I've spent years building a life without family. I'm open to changing that, but not at the expense of my self-respect. From the foyer, Amanda's voice called sharply, Mom, are you coming or not? My mother looked toward the sound, then back at me. The conflict was evident in her expression, the habitual response to Amanda's demands warring with the new awareness of what she might be losing with me. I should go calm her down, she said finally. But we will talk more, Jarvis. I promise. I nodded, not fully believing the promise, but willing to leave the door open. You know where to find me. She turned to go, then paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The house, the renovations, everything. It's beautiful, Jarvis. You've done well for yourself. Your father would have been proud. With that, she followed Amanda and the children out the front door, leaving me standing in the kitchen with Rachel beside me and the weight of decades lifting ever so slightly from my shoulders. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Rachel's family closed ranks around us, her father mixing fresh drinks, her mother deftly changing the subject whenever guests looked like they might ask about the dramatic departure of my family members. Rachel herself stayed by my side, a steady presence that anchored me as I navigated the remainder of the party on autopilot. By midnight, the last guests had departed. The catering staff had cleaned up efficiently, leaving the house in perfect order despite the earlier chaos. Rachel and I sat on the back patio, wrapped in light blankets against the autumn chill. A bottle of wine opened between us. Are you okay? She asked, her fingers intertwined with mine. I considered the question seriously. Yes, I said finally. Better than I expected, actually. There's something freeing about having everything out in the open. They might surprise you, Rachel suggested gently. Your mother seemed genuinely conflicted at the end. I nodded, not committing either way. Years of disappointment had taught me to be cautious with hope where my family was concerned. Either way, I said I've said what I needed to say. The ball's in their court now. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the distant sounds of the city and the closer rustle of leaves in the garden. Did you mean what you told them? Rachel asked eventually. About this being where we'll raise our family. I turned to face her, taking both her hands in mine. Absolutely. If that's what you want too. Her smile was answer enough. The days following the party were strangely peaceful. I had expected to feel anxious about the confrontation, to second-guess my words or actions. Instead, I felt a clarity that had been missing for years. I had stated my boundaries. I had acknowledged my worth. Whatever happened next, I had broken free of the pattern of seeking approval that would never come. Rachel returned to San Francisco to tie up loose ends at her design firm, planning to move permanently to Boston by the end of the month. I focused on setting up my home office, exploring the neighborhood, and establishing routines in my new city. 5 days after the party, a text message arrived from an unfamiliar number. This is your mother. Amanda gave me a new phone for my birthday. Could we meet for coffee? Just the two of us. I suggested a cafe halfway between our houses for the following afternoon. When I arrived, she was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She had taken the time to find out how I took mine, a small gesture, but one that suggested an effort I wasn't accustomed to receiving from her. Thank you for meeting me. She began, her hands wrapped around her cup, as if drawing warmth from it. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the party. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. I owe you an apology, she said, the words clearly difficult for her. Many apologies, actually. For how I treated you growing up. For asking you to leave when you were 18. For missing your grandfather's funeral. For a lot of things. The admission was unexpected. In all my imagined scenarios for this meeting, a straightforward apology had never featured. After your father died, she continued, I was lost. Amanda was so demanding, so emotional, and you were so self-sufficient. It was easier to focus on her needs because they were loud. Your needs were quiet, so I convinced myself they weren't as important. She looked down at her coffee. That was wrong of me. Yes, I agreed simply. It was. She nodded, accepting the response without defensiveness. When you left, when I made you leave, I told myself it was for the best. That you were going to MIT, that you would be fine. I didn't let myself think about where you would stay during breaks or how you would manage financially. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I chose not to think about it because thinking about it would have forced me to acknowledge what a terrible thing I was doing. The honesty was disarming. This wasn't the mother I remembered, the one who rewrote reality to avoid accountability. What changed? I asked. Why now? She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Seeing your house. Seeing what you've built for yourself without any help from me. It forced me to face what I'd done. Not just what I'd done to you, but what I'd done to myself. I missed knowing my son. I missed seeing the amazing man you've become. She reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the table to me. I wrote this the night after the party. It says everything I'm trying to say now, probably more clearly. I've never been good at these conversations. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Thank you. I'll read it later. Amanda is still angry, she added, a shadow crossing her face. She feels humiliated, though. I've tried to explain that you weren't trying to humiliate her. She's always been stubborn, like me, I suppose. And the house? I asked, the practical question unavoidable. We won't be looking for another place, she said firmly. That's not why I wanted to meet. Whether you decide to keep the house or sell it is your business decision. I'm here because you're my son, and I've been a poor excuse for a mother. I'd like to try to do better if you'll let me. The words were exactly what I had longed to hear for most of my life. Yet now, hearing them, I felt neither triumphant nor vindicated, just a quiet sadness for all the years lost, and perhaps a tentative hope for what might still be possible. I'd like that, I said finally. It won't be easy. There's a lot of history between us. I know, she acknowledged. I'm not expecting miracles. Just a chance. We talked for another hour, covering safer topics. Her job at the local library, my plans for a new tech venture, Rachel's upcoming move to Boston. It wasn't the warm reunion of television movies, but it was honest. It was a beginning. When we parted outside the cafe, she hesitated, then asked, "Would it be all right if I hugged you?" The question, the simple act of asking permission, rather than assuming, told me more about her willingness to change than any words could have. I nodded, and she embraced me briefly, her frame feeling smaller and more fragile than I remembered. That evening, alone in my study, I opened the letter she had given me. Inside was a handwritten note, the paper tear-stained in places, expressing regrets and apologies far more vulnerable than she had managed in person. At the bottom was a postscript: "I've started therapy. I should have done it years ago. I want to understand why I failed you so badly, so I don't continue making the same mistakes." The weeks that followed brought slow, careful steps toward rebuilding. Rachel moved to Boston, bringing energy and new life to the house. My mother came to dinner alone at first, then eventually with Amanda's children, whom she often watched while Amanda worked. Amanda herself remained distant, but the children, free from their mother's resentments, began to form relationships with their uncle and soon-to-be aunt. Junior, in particular, showed an interest in computers that reminded me of myself at his age. On his 8th birthday, I gave him his first programming book and set up a simple coding environment on a laptop Rachel and I no longer used. Watching his face light up as he created his first Hello World program, I felt a connection to my own childhood self, the boy who had longed for someone to notice and nurture his interests. 6 months after the housewarming party, I received an unexpected email from Amanda. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement. "Mom says you're teaching Junior to code," she wrote. "He talks about it constantly. I've never seen him so excited about learning something. Thank you for that. He needs positive male influences." It was a small olive branch, but a genuine one. I responded with an invitation for Junior to join a weekend coding club I had started volunteering with. Amanda accepted on his behalf. Rachel and I married the following spring, in the garden of the Winston Mansion, surrounded by friends and chosen family. My mother attended elegantly dressed and making a visible effort to connect with Rachel's parents. Amanda came too, bringing all 3 children dressed in their best clothes. Their behavior notably improved from the housewarming disaster. During the reception, I found myself standing beside Grandpa Thomas's empty chair, a small memorial we had included in the ceremony. I raised my glass silently to him, thanking him not just for the financial legacy that had helped me build my life, but for the greater gift, the belief in my worth when no one else could see it. The journey from abandoned 18-year-old to the man I had become wasn't one I would have chosen. The pain of rejection, the struggle to succeed alone, the years of separation from my family, none of it was easy. But standing in the garden of my home, watching my new wife laugh with friends, seeing my mother make a genuine effort to change, I recognized that our greatest strength often emerges from our deepest wounds. I had learned that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about who shows up, who supports your dreams, who sees your value without conditions. I had learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting or excusing past wrongs, it's choosing not to let those wrongs determine your future. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is to open the door to reconciliation, not because you need it, but because you're secure enough in your own worth to offer it. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took you for granted? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building success against the odds. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve respect regardless of their family situation. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we're born into.